Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. Guys,
Hi.
I've got Saida with me from Sada Yoga. Saida, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, to be honest, because since I've seen your content online, I've been a big fan. So I thought I'll ask you if you're free to have a chat on with me on the podcast. So thank you very much for joining me.
It's great. I'm excited to be here. I always like to talk about yoga, so I'm in my element.
Yeah, as you said, you're excited to talk about yoga. So let's start with something like how you got into it. Like, what inspired you to do yoga?
Sure. So I was introduced to the practice by a friend many years ago. And I was the kind of person that never really did much physical activity or exercise. So when I first started, I didn't really enjoy it much. But with a bit of time, I kind of just felt myself being drawn to what was happening within myself when I was on the mat practicing. And I had a really interesting experience in a yoga class in Goa that just kind of really changed my life in an instant. And it
So
was
so,
from
so you were
there.
visiting India at that time?
Yes, I was. Yeah, yeah. So
So
I'd practiced a little bit beforehand, and I
okay,
had learnt a few poses, and I started at the gym, and I was doing some workouts to better my mental health more than anything.
okay,
And I was using the poses just to stretch afterwards to,
okay.
make my muscles feel better. And then, yeah, I went to Goa, and I thought to myself, well, as I'm in India, I must do a proper yoga class.
So you went to India just to travel, or do you have any family ties over there?
I do have family over there, and that trip was a bit of both. So I went back with my parents and I visited my family in the north of India for several weeks.
Okay, so your dad is from India, and your
Correct, yeah.
mother is English, I believe.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
right, yeah.
so
Yeah,
the
so I did
best of
some,
both worlds, Saida, I hope.
so yeah, I did some family things for a couple of weeks, and then one of my old friends that I was traveling with in Thailand, she met me in Delhi, and we spent a couple of weeks together, and we went down to Goa together and spent some time on the beaches, and it was there that
Okay.
I did the yoga class. So yeah.
Perfect, perfect. That seems like a fun trip. Then got into something more for you, like more in terms of like you got to inspired with some new activity in your life.
Well, do you know, I'd say that inspired is probably an understatement. I
Oh,
think
okay,
in that moment, it totally changed the whole path of my life.
okay,
Yeah, it's kind of profound, and I don't like to dumb it down because it was really it was life changing. I had this moment in this class where for the first time I really felt this sense of compassion for myself and this sense of being connected to my body and who I was as a person, which is something I've always struggled with up until that point in my life. So I just knew that there was something very powerful within this practice and something that was going on here, and there we go. I just delve into it, and I just wanted to learn more, and I wanted to do more, and I wanted to know everything there was to know about yoga.
oh, perfect, perfect. Seems like very interesting because a lot of friends in the past have told me like their experiences with like a life changing moment. So perhaps that was the one for you, because I think I told you when we were chatting before as well that of course my background, and I'm a bit spiritual and religious as well. So I've been praying as a Muslim from a young age, and I remember that when I started praying, I was quite an average student in my school, but in the sixth standard in Pakistan, I remember I started praying 5 times a day. My mom and dad kind of motivated me, inspired me for it, but some of it was my own motivation as well. But I remember that was actually a life-changing moment for me, because after that sixth standard, I used to be, I think in about 50 students, I used to be my, like, they give you grades and stuff. So I used to come either 28th, 29th in that group. But after the sixth standard, I was first, second, third. Even in sports, I was performing really well. I think it
Wow.
changed my life. And now when I look back, I feel like my life would be kind of incomplete without it, because everything I do is very consistent. It all comes from me consistently praying 5 times a day. And of course, as a young Muslim, I was taught by a scholar or parents. But later on, when I came to the UK and I started studying religion individually, like a revert, studying different schools of thoughts, then alhamdulillah, that broadened my vision, and I was able to learn more, you can say different schools of thoughts gave me a better understanding of my faith.
That's great. That's awesome that it gave you so much in your life. I think there is a lot to be said about having a practice in your life, whatever path or modality that may come from. I think that it creates a lot of discipline in somebody's life.
Yeah.
And the consistency of showing up and doing the same thing all the time is what really kind of grounds a person in a way,
It does. It creates a pattern in your life, and I think you reach a point where even other goals of your life, if you are struggling, that motivation of getting up or praying, and to be honest, a lot of people when ask me why do you pray in the past, I always say that the simplest description from my perspective is that it's a soul bath. Like, we get up every day, we brush, we wash ourselves. Similarly, our internal, our heart, our mind, our thoughts need cleansing as well, and that's what prayer does to me, kind of meditation. But we'll go more deep into that when we'll start our questions. But that's really interesting that when as soon as you said to me that was a life-changing moment for you, I can recall that in my sixth standard, that was a life-changing incident for me as well. So I can relate to that, what you were saying. I had another interesting question as you were telling me about your background. So of course you were born in the UK with one parent as Indian and one parent as English. How did you felt that? Like, did you get a lot of kind of support or maybe friendships from all direction where you grew up? How was your kind of, like, how did that, being a half caste, how was your experience of that in Britain?
It was tough. It was really, really tough, I'll be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, it was really, really challenging for me. I grew up in a small town, Weston-super-Mare. So when
I've been there, yeah, I've lived there when I was working in Dyson for 6 months. I remember. Alex, we know, if you remember. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So as you know, Weston is relatively small.
Smaller.
And, I'm in my mid-30s now. So however many years ago, of course, times were a little bit different then. The community in this town of Asian or ethnic minorities was a lot smaller than what it is now. So
okay, yeah.
In my primary school, me and my sister were the only people who weren't white. We were the only people that weren't Caucasian.
Oh, okay.
So
because I've seen Weston-super-Mare. I haven't seen a lot of Asians or our Caribbean community over there. Mostly I've seen English people.
Now.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a lot more now, and like I say, I think people are coming from Bristol because there's a big community.
It is, in Bristol, yes, yeah.
Yeah, but then back then, however many years ago, 30 years ago, there was not many people. So I was always considered different at school.
Okay.
Because
were you welcome in one community more than the other? Was that the case?
No, I kind of had the same experience in both communities. So
okay.
I also was brought up in a Muslim family, in a Muslim home. So I have some understanding of Islam, but not very much because I kind of left the religion in my teenage years.
Okay.
So when I was just before a teenager, I was learning how to read Arabic and learning how to read the Quran, and I was attending a school with a small community of Indian, Bangladeshi, Pakistani children.
Okay.
But of course, there I was half white.
Okay.
So I kind of, to be honest, I experienced, kind of racism on both sides. I wasn't a proper Muslim because I was half white, and I wasn't.
I believe maybe a lot of people may relate to you on that, because I know a few friends who were telling something similar. But also the fact that, of course, growing up in that era, I can imagine that because our community wasn't that widespread. And again, another factor is that nowadays, I think, like me being studying Islam on my own, listening to different schools of thought rather than just being told, just do that, and explaining the logic of things, changed quite a lot of things. But maybe I don't know if you had that sort of a stretch of experience where you were exploring it, like we explore anything in a university when we are studying a subject, or rather being only told to do something. Do you see the difference I'm talking about?
100% I do. I mean, I think it was really hard for me because my dad was very busy working all the time. So whenever he did speak about Islam, it was very far and few between, you know. There was not much in there to get me inspired. And
And get the logic of it, as you can.
Yeah. And this is what we do, and that's it. And it's just like, okay, so I've been told to do these things, but I had no idea why.
Why?
And for me, the why, in a sense, is very important. Now I may think differently about the why because I don't think it's a very spiritual question. But, you know, as a child.
But as a child, no. These days, when children are growing up, because it's a time of media information, they ask these questions, and I think that nowadays parents have to be educated themselves in order to teach their children properly, like maybe understanding Quran with translation, and like understand the context before you explain it to your children. And I think that's one of the key here, where people, while growing up, if you want them to understand something, explain them logically, and then leave the decision on them. Like, let them evolve into it, give them that room to explore, inspire, and then follow.
Well, that's it. I totally agree. And it's an interesting thing because I can't help but kind of want to talk now about like the social, social aspect of religion in general. It's like, you know, if we are born, I mean, I don't know whether you've heard of a man called Gabor Mate. He writes lots of books on addiction and psychology. He's a physician from Canada. He's fantastic, by the way. If anybody's interested in that kind of thing, I highly recommend you read most of his books. But he talks a lot about the social aspect of people and how society can affect our lives and who we are. And, you know, as children, if we are born into a family of religion, it's like from a very young age, we don't even really get the choice. It's just okay, so this is it.
That's
You're
a
born.
really, really good, and this is why, because it's quite imperative what you said, and it has a lot of impact and influence. Then this is why when I came to the UK at the age of 17, 18, I thought that, you know, what if I was born in maybe a different religious family. So this is why when I started studying about Islam, it was from a very neutral perspective, and I studied other religions as well, comparative religion, and then including in my own faith different schools of thoughts. As you can see in Christianity, it's Catholicism and Protestant. So similarly in Islam is Shia and Sunni and so on. There's a lot of other branches as well. But without going into details, if you are not able to question and research, how would you be able to understand that, you know, this is your path? So exactly. I always think that parents should definitely encourage that enthusiasm and questioning, and let their children research and choose that path themselves.
And choose it themselves, exactly, because, you know, I think we can run the risk of just, I hate this word, but enforcing something on somebody, you know, and then it's just like, because I kind of felt like that. I felt like I was being put in this situation where I had to do these things and I didn't know why, and it made me feel uncomfortable a lot of the time, you know, and obviously, you know, the racial aspect of what I spoke about previously. So, you know, it didn't make any sense to me at all, and I think this is why I moved quite far away from it, and I questioned a lot throughout my young life. You know, I was very much a philosopher, I guess, you know, the meaning of life. And
no, it's all these questions, Saida, you're talking about, they are very important questions, and if you were thinking about those questions in a young age, that's actually tells me that how much depth you had even from a young age. One of my friend actually said something similar, where it kind of he felt enforced in the young age, so it just kind of made him discouraged researching further about the faith. Whereas now when I've explored it, I actually feel very encouraged, because I want to show, like, you know, you have got yoga. I feel like the way I've explored faith, it's a treasure I want people to explore as well. So I feel excited about it because the way I explored it. But like, just from the religious perspective, if God or Allah wanted everybody to follow a path, or maybe born in a certain religion, then why given the choice? So even messengers who came from the faith did not enforce people. They pass on their message, they pass on the logic, and they let people decide, that people choose. And I think this is how parents should adapt it as well, because it's not forceful. Let people come towards it. That's my perspective.
Really appreciate what you've said there, because I have actually had conversations with people who, I mean, for one, there's, in this community, I say spiritual community, there's a lot out there in regards to people who are, awakening or trying to become enlightened. And I use these quotation marks because these are kind of fluffy words in a way, really we're just trying to be more conscious human beings and live a better life and be more compassionate. But, I've seen people say, why can't everyone just wake up? Why can't everyone just have this? And I'm like, we're not all meant to do this. I don't think everyone is meant to be on a spiritual path.
Or at a particular time, because maybe what somebody realized in their 30th year, maybe somebody else might in the 40th, somebody else might be in the 21st. So every person's life is different.
And when you think about yoga in the sense that back in the day when it was first around, it was a very solitary practice. People would renounce everything. They would remove themselves from material life. They would go away from their families. They would go and live in an ashram or a cave. And they would do this very, thing, and they would just be cut off from everything. And it's like, we, in this modern world, this is a very difficult thing to do. People have children and jobs and bills to pay for and all this kind of stuff, and that's okay. It's like some people are meant to be parents or doctors or nurses. Like, we need people from all walks of life so that society can thrive. It's like
and you won't believe, Saida, like what you're saying. I'm just putting in an example and the context where, when I was growing up in one of the religious branch, I was told that 5 times a day you can pray, and then every prayer has a certain number of prayers, like rakats as they call it. But when I explored different schools of thought, I realized that the more authentic is just you only go for the fundamental ones, the obligatory ones, the first, and even them you can merge prayers as well. Instead of 5 times, you can do 3 times. You can do afternoon prayers. You can merge them, and the evening and the night one. So there's so much leniency. Whereas if you go by only one school of thought, they might say to you, no, we don't agree with that. But when you research about it more authentically, then you will realize that no, that's not the case. There is so much leniency, and of course our life is so. If this religion is going to survive until, as they say, until the day of judgment, then it should have the leniency to adapt with every form of life.
Exactly. And I just want to add on to what I said, because what I may have said may have come across that, yoga is or was created for a small number of people that are elitist or superior, and that's not what I'm getting at here at all. I also want to point out, I'm kind of debunking that in a way, but making sure that, also this practice, you don't have to go down this renouncing route where you cut everything off and you try and reach enlightenment and merge your consciousness with, itself. It's it can be part of a daily practice where it can give you much benefit to your life, physically, mentally, spiritually, and you can just use it to live a better, more fulfilled life.
And it's good that you touched upon it, because my YouTube followers, they send me the same question as well, like what is yoga and how is it different from meditation or spirituality. So you kind of touched upon that. So if you want, you can maybe touch upon it a little bit more.
I know, I would like to. So I mean, the question, what is yoga? I mean, how long have we got, first of all? But I'll try and make it short. It's I think it's really important to note that in the West, yoga, what we predominantly know of it is that it's, again, I'm using these quotation marks, a physical exercise, right? The physical compartment of yoga is what's most known in the West. But really, the practice of yoga it's a way of life. It started off actually as a philosophy. It comes from Hindu philosophy, actually. So it is rooted in religion, but there's also other influences that come from Buddhism as well. So, and it dates back really quite far. So I would say that it is a system made up of various practices, which can incorporate physical, it can incorporate breath work, forms of meditation, and also many other things. You can there's something called bhakti yoga, which is devotional yoga. So you may have heard of something called kirtan before, which is
I've heard of
Yeah, so you may have a group of people congregate together and sing mantras to some of the Hindu gods over and over, and this kind of devotional
Because
aspect
it's interesting
brings you
when you,
closer.
yeah, it's interesting when you tell me that, because I found that quite a few of the things quite similar to Islamic rituals as well. Like, for example, they also chant or words and do it together. I don't know if you might have known
Yeah.
Jamaat in mosque; they pray together. So
Right.
quite a lot of that I've found that similar. So in terms of like meditation and spirituality, so you're trying to say that it has different practices which touch upon meditation and spirituality, but it's a thing on its own.
It is a thing on its own. And I think, for me personally, the essence of the intention behind the practice is to bring yourself closer to yourself. So let's put it in simplest terms, it's connection. The word yoga in Sanskrit actually means to unite. It comes
Okay.
from the Sanskrit root yuj, which is unite.
Unite.
So if we look at one of the pinnacle texts of yoga, which is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali,
Yeah.
within this, Patanjali systemized yoga.
Yeah.
And the reason why he systemized it, because he was trying to explain how to get to this one point. And that one point is to basically experience consciousness within itself.
Yeah.
So we are merging into oneness, basically.
Very good, very good. Because whenever you explain me more, it's just like I can, from my perspective, I can relate to so many things which I've learned as well in my journey. And I remembered one of the verse of the Quran where it says that Allah have created mankind and jinn to worship Him or connect with Him, and that oneness is actually. It resonates in a lot of religions. Of course, I think you probably already know Christianity and Judaism. The basics are still kind of the same with Islam, praying to one God, God who has no image. Of course, people differentiate in different religions further on top of that, but kind of the basics are similar. So that's quite interesting to know, Saida, that the information you're sharing with me, because of course I wasn't aware of that.
Cool.
So that's quite enlightening in that way. So I think one of the other very interesting questions somebody asked is that is yoga is an exercise or is it a spiritual healing? Like, how is it still kind of in that context of understanding?
So my answer to this question would be, yoga is very broad, especially in this day and age. It's very broad. You can come at the practice from different angles. You can use it for healing, whether that be spiritual, mental, physical. There are, Iyengar, one of the most famous yoga teachers who really made yoga prominent in the West. He took a very physical approach to healing the body from disease. I think he had tuberculosis, or maybe something else as a child. And through the practice of yoga, he healed himself and his body. Okay. So it can be used for physical healing and spiritual healing. I think that just the nature of the practices that are in yoga, it has a healing effect anyway. And I speak from that personally because of my own journey and why I was drawn to the practice, and I had that life-changing experience. But yeah, also the physical aspect of yoga could be seen as an exercise to keep the body strong and agile. And the whole point of the physical yoga is to prepare the body for meditation so that we can sit for long hours in cross-legged position. Okay, so
in India, Pakistan, a lot of people sit in that position. You might have seen that side, isn't it? I think in Urdu they call it chokri. Way they sit, that position, and the way they meditate. So I'm not sure about in Western society, but in India, Pakistan, I've seen that a lot. People sitting in that position.
Yeah, and it's like I say, I think some people's idea of yoga may be misinterpreted through social media, and on Instagram, there's many teachers who are, twisting themselves into all these positions, and people just get this idea of that's what yoga is, that it's a physical exercise. So I think it's important. I mean, I definitely I feel like I have a responsibility as a yoga teacher to try and uphold the traditions of the practice as much as possible and make sure that I tell my students that, this is a spiritual practice and it does have history and roots. And, I want to, what's the word? I want to honor that,
Yeah.
I don't want that to get lost. I think that that's really, really important to bring that forward. It's been successful for so many years. So let's not change it. We can have, science back it up now, which is wonderful, but let's keep the tradition alive, because we need to just honor that, I think.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like, let's keep the spiritual aspect of it alive. By not only calling it just an exercise, of course, like the roots and history of it. No, that's and I think, according to some scholars, the authenticity of something can only be measured with what historic roots it has got. And this is why when I started studying about Islam as well, one of the key things was history and how many, like, the perspective that from Adam, the first messenger according to Islam, until Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, are all came from same God. So that historical link, that all came for the same message, but of course different books of the people of that time.
Yeah.
So that book explained that, basics remained the same, but further details were a bit similar. But of course, going forward, then people made their own interpretations. But that's just my personal research into it, that when people made their own interpretations into it, that's when things got more widespread and dispersed from the main idea.
And I think watered down in a sense as well, and I do see this a lot in the yoga world. It's become very popular very quickly, which is fantastic because yoga is a great practice that can help benefit many people. But I just think it's really important that we remember where it came from. And as yoga teachers, we have responsibility to learn more and keep learning and be really rooted in the tradition and where it came from.
No, that's perfect. Another reason, because I correlate and I speak about religion as well, because a lot of my YouTube followers, because of course they're from Pakistan. So when they ask me questions, they, like, for example, one of them said that I am a Muslim, I pray often, does some of the postures similar to yoga? Like, he was meaning that the prayers posture. So how would you shed some light on that?
It's interesting, because when I think about it, really, when you're praying, it's much like kriya in yoga. So the word kriya is like a completed action. It's a technique or a practice that's a discipline to achieve a specific result.
Okay. So
just that in its essence means it's very similar to what we're doing.
So
they correlate.
So you're referring to the sajda, the where you're on the floor towards Kaaba, that posture?
First of all, just the totality of
okay.
The totality of your prayer, that you're showing up and you're reciting prayer, which in yoga would be mantra.
Okay.
You are doing movement, which is asana, and you're working with the breath as well, right? You breathe out.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is pranayama. Okay. So
that's really interesting.
I know, right? There's a huge link. Just between the basics and fundamentals of what you do when you show up on the mat, right? So
Wow. Even the mat as well. So that's really interesting.
Right.
And
so there's that, but also the postures, in a sense, you can kind of compare them to like a sun salutation in a way. You do the same thing over and over, and it's always the same every time. So it's a set sequence, isn't it?
Yeah.
Again, it's like, I think where it might differ is the intention. The intention of what the practice is doing and why you are there. So I mean, I can only speak from the yoga perspective. I can quite like see a lot of similarity, and to me it's like it's quite interesting to know all of these things, and of course for the viewers it will be as well. One of the very interesting questions were, can you shed some light on addiction recovery in terms of yoga? Yeah, sure. Okay, so I am in addiction recovery myself.
Okay.
And the when I explained to you about having that profound moment in the yoga class. This is kind of, it was yoga that got me onto the road to actually really recovering. So I had been using substances from my early teenage years and throughout my life until I was, in my late 20s.
Mainly because you felt a bit isolated, lonely growing up, or different, or bad company, or lots of factors.
Reasons. Yeah, I mean, so addiction stems from trauma.
Yeah.
It's trauma. So I had a lot of trauma in my life, developmental and some other traumas throughout my teenage years and afterwards as well. So it's a coping mechanism. Any addiction is a way to soothe pain and suffering, basically. We learn it very early on. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing in a sense that, you did the best that you could in that scenario. Yeah. But of course, over time, problematic if you're struggling to stop that behavior. This is where it becomes an addiction. So yoga was vital in my recovery. It gave me many things. It gave me structure. It gave me discipline. It made me feel good. It allowed me to be connected to myself, like I said, in a way that I never felt possible before. Yeah. And just that in itself allowed me to start to bring some compassion to me and my story. And that allowed me to start healing, because I think probably most addicts are very self-critical. Okay. We hold a lot of shame because of the things which have happened to us.
That's interesting analysis of that.
Yeah. So it was vital, and I've done some trainings in the past couple of years which have been a little bit more in depth in addiction and yoga and recovery theory and how they correlate, because obviously now, like I said, the science that we have is catching up. There is I don't know whether you've heard of something called polyvagal theory.
No, I remember you mentioned it before, but please shed some light on that.
Sure, I'm going to try and keep it short because it's a big thing, but it's great. So Dr. Stephen Porges coined this term, and polyvagal theory is basically talking about our vagus nerve. So we have this biggest nerve in the body. It starts in the face and the brainstem. It runs all the way down the front side of the body and it ends in the pelvis. Okay. And the vagus nerve controls our respiratory system, the digestion. It controls our fight or flight response. Now, this is key, along with our hormonal production and all that kind of stuff. So when we are stressed, anxious, or have experienced trauma, the vagus nerve will contract. Okay. It will go like this. And at the same time, the rest of the body will respond accordingly. So
maybe a faster heartbeat, or the rest of the body would start to trigger these symptoms.
100%, because if there's a perceived threat, whether that be real or otherwise, the body needs to respond in the right way, so that we either need to fight it or run away from it, or
fight or flight.
Exactly. And just to point out, this system within the body is primal. It's been here since day one. So the body reacts just on its own, does what it does, but we now, like, our conscious mind can't really see the difference half the time. So it's like it still does what it needs to do. It's basically there to keep you alive. But often, and especially now in our modern world, there are so many stressors that we tend to get stuck in this stress response. So as I said, the vagus nerve contracts like this, and it becomes very tight, very rigid. This stops our open-minded thinking, and it makes us more stressed and anxious. So polyvagal theory is basically saying that we have the capacity to be able to switch that over quite quickly. Okay. Using the vagus nerve. So there are many things which we can do to help switch us back to our rest and digest mode, which is where we feel safe, where we feel calm, and where we can basically, our body is working at its homeostasis level. So that's where we're nice and balanced. So what generally happens is when the body completes a stress cycle, it should just do this automatically. So stressor happens or trigger comes, body moves into fight or flight mode. And then once trigger has gone, the body should just take its way back to rest and digest over here. This doesn't happen a lot of the time because we're just always over here, stressor, right? So we need to find ways how we can come back over here and relax. So Really simple. Yoga's fantastic for this.
Okay.
All we need to do is stretch the front side of the body.
Okay.
And it will really help our vagal tone, and it will help us move back into the parasympathetic nervous system state, which is the rest and digest.
Would you like to show us?
Sure.
Perfect.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are many which we can do. Most simplest one is like a cat-cow position. So if you come to an all-fours position and your shoulders are over the wrist and the hips are over the knees, and just spreading the fingers wide and keeping the elbows straight. So as I said, we're going to be stretching the front side of the body. So we can use the breath here as well.
Yeah.
We'll just inhale to dip the mid back and look forwards. And then we exhale to round the spine and bring the chin towards the chest.
Okay.
And then inhale to dip the mid back, look forwards. And then exhale, round, chin to chest. And you would just continue doing this, maybe 8 to 10 rounds.
Okay.
And this is a really great one to do. It not only does it, relax your vagus nerve, but also stretches the shoulders, the chest, the hips.
Yeah.
It's a daily exercise would be beneficial. So yeah, anything that stretches the front side of the body is really good for helping with vagal tone.
Perfect. So do you call that posture vagal tone? Am I correct?
So I'm just relating the postures to building vagal tone.
Building vagal tone.
Yeah. So having a strong vagal tone means that we can complete that stress response cycle quicker, and then we can move back into feeling calm and rested once we have a trigger or a threat in our life.
Oh, perfect. Because that's quite interesting. Because one of the person also asked about, like, a lot of the times when they get anxious, it can be any trigger. For different people it might be different, but what can they do in order to immediately calm themselves? And the way you just showed me that posture and described the theory behind it, it was quite interesting.
I have one better, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
So whilst the body is great, one of the quickest ways to help us reduce anxiety or move back into the parasympathetic is through the breathing.
Okay.
So as I said, the vagus nerve is directly linked to the respiratory system. You may notice if you are anxious or upset or angry, the breath changes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we're scared. We breathe in, okay? Or if we're crying, sometimes we start to hyperventilate, okay? This is the body showing us that we're in distress or there is a lot of emotions going on.
Yeah.
So, and obviously maybe when you're calm, you're breathing nice and slow. It's probably just there in the background. When you're asleep, most of the time the breath will be quite non-existent, maybe even,
Yeah.
So another great way is through the breath. Really, really simple. All you need to do is just focus on making your exhale longer.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
So yeah, if you're starting to feel overwhelmed or anxious, just bring your attention to the breath and just focus on exhaling longer. And I would suggest breathing in and out of the nose as well if you can. This will help calm the body down further because we tend to pant when we're breathing out of the mouth. So if you can breathe slowly in and out of the nose and focus on a longer exhale.
Perfect. That's really interesting. And I can, in a way, while you were telling me all of this, I was relating it with the fact that when I'm working throughout the day, and when I go for prayers 2-3 times during the working hours, it just completely takes my mind off for any workload, stress, or anything like that, because the way I'm breathing, the way I'm concentrating on the prayer mat and the postures and spiritually connecting with Allah, I feel like a lot of that, saying I never think about my breathing is going to be like that, but automatically when you go towards prayers, it just like naturally you feel that way. I mean, I never have to maybe like force it out of me. It just naturally happens for me. So that's really interesting, because of course people in that any scenario like that, when they, as you said, it's now it just kind of just triggered to me that wow, that even that small thing can make such a big difference, even your breathing exercise.
That's great, because obviously, I think this is the beauty of doing something again and again and again, because your body, your mind, your breath is getting accustomed to the way you feel on the mat when you connect to Allah, when you are breathing, right? When you are praying. It's the same as when you're on the yoga mat. I mean, it's not always like that though on the yoga mat. Sometimes you can bring stuff, and maybe even the same when you pray. Maybe it's not always the same.
No. I think you're right. And a lot of the times when I'm like I feel like I'm conscious about something or worried about something, I'll share it over here. But this is kind of like I don't know how to put it. I don't have any other word than saying it's miraculous. Where a lot of the times when I've came back from prayers, I found solutions of a lot of things I was thinking about, as if somebody guided me. Like a lot of the times, if I'm confused about something, I pray in my prayers that Allah, if this is good for me, make things easier for me. If it's not good for me, then maybe close doors or maybe change my pattern or my path. And a lot of the times when I've come back from prayers and within a certain time period, I feel like I've got my decision which path I can go. Things start to get easier in the path which I'm going towards. So
That's great.
even like
Yeah.
a strategy analysis, I feel like when I pray, I can share anything with God. And of course, before I reached that point, I researched what God is. Do you believe in God? All the logical questions, like starting from observing the universe. Does it all have a meaning? So I did it from a very neutral perspective. And then, like for example, this is a very quick one, but a lot of the times I say to my friend in the past that if I bury an iPhone into sand, and after maybe a few days or few months somebody come and dig that and see the iPhone, they'll see a pattern to it. There's a function, there's a calendar, the way you can call. You won't say that it just came out of chance. You will see an intelligence in that phone. Similarly, when I look at the world, I see everything to be so precise to exist that it can't be by chance. I feel a very systematic purpose in it, and that's how I started my research toward Islam and Allah and all of that. So it always, even Quran tells you that this is how you start your journey towards Allah. And then I kept on researching about every question. For example, why people are disabled, why there's so misery, what's the judgment day is all about, why there's a heaven, and like I kept on going. I'd never stopped. And now this is why I feel like when I got all those answers, I feel very complete. And I feel like depression is the way I analyze it, that depression is unanswered questions. And when I got the answers to my questions I was researching, I felt complete and content, and now I can help other people with depression and anxiety, or maybe
Yeah.
doing CBT. So so that was really interesting when I went through that journey. So it's all, as you were saying it as well, it's just small things can make such a big difference. And I
Yeah,
think this is why, if somebody as my parent, imagine if your dad growing up explained you about faith like this, imagine the different perspective about that.
Yeah, I don't know though. I mean, I don't know whether it would have the same effect. I mean, because I kind of feel like, me having gone through what I went through and kind of going full circle in a way, and then, finding my spirituality through yoga is what brought me back to myself. So
I think every person's journey is their own. All I'm saying is that when you listen to different perspectives, and because as I said, somebody may reach it in 20 years, somebody maybe 40, 50, every person's for their own journey. And for me, it took me 7 years to keep researching, and then kind of most of my questions were answered. So it's for every person is different. But if the perspective would have been given or presented to you in a different way, maybe your journey would have led to you where it is already, but maybe slightly different as well, because you never know, or what's going to happen in the future, we don't know. So I think as a human being, we should never stop learning, never stop questioning, never stop researching. That's kind of the crux of it, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's always learning. Growth mindset, this is what we're here to do. We're here to grow and expand.
And we never stop evolving.
The universe is expanding, right? It's like, this is us. The universe is going like this, so we should too, right?
Yeah. No, and it has definitely given me like that broad vision about life and everything, and I can connect to other communities, other people. It's just, I just love that thing since I've researched like that individually. But one of the last questions I have, one of the person sent me the question saying that they have a long stressful day at work. When they come back, can there be 2-3 like yoga positions they can try on a daily basis? Like you can say these yoga 101 kind of like, these are a couple of basic things. I know there's quite a lot of big variety of exercises and breathing techniques you can offer, which you can of course tell people at the end if they want a more detailed discussion with you. But in terms of like 2-3 quick maybe positions or postures,
I'm gonna have to just throw in there, that we need to take into consideration that firstly, everybody is different. So what might work for one person won't work for another.
Very well said. Very well said.
Secondly, consistency is key. So, there is no quick fix when it comes to these types of things. You may have some immediate benefit after doing a yoga class once or twice, but in order for the practice to really benefit you and minimize your stress and anxiety, you have to keep showing up. And that's number 2. So, okay, poses. I think I can give you, right. So one good pose, I'll show you. I think, did I recently write a blog about this? No, but I'm going to. So
that's a good idea for you as well, Saida.
So this is a really nice one to relax you. It's called legs up the wall pose. So you want to make sure you have a clear wall. Obviously, if you're doing it against a door and you live with people, make sure they know that you are doing this, because you don't want them to open the door.
Okay.
So, so you want to come in at an angle and touch your hips against the side of the wall, and then come and lie down, and then take your feet up. And you can just stay here for 5 minutes minimum, maybe longer if you want to. It's nice to do this one before bedtime as well. So, you know, the blood is circulating around the body in a different way to normal. It's very good for your lymphatic system. And I've heard people say that they feel very, very relaxed once they've done legs up the wall pose.
So you call it legs up the wall pose?
Legs up the wall, yeah. So that's number 1. Number 2, I would say some kind of just conscious breathing, really, just focusing on the breath, whether that be just the natural rhythm or, like I said, slowing the exhale down a little bit.
Saida, what about that chokri pose, that pose a lot of the people see as on the wallpaper when somebody is doing yoga,
you mean like lotus pose?
Lotus, yes.
Some people's hips and knees aren't meant to go into lotus pose.
When you close your eyes, think about yoga, that's the first image a lot of people might see. So
yeah, exactly. And most people can't do that pose. So
yeah. Would you show us, Saida, like just that posture by sitting in that way?
Yeah, sure. So I have flexible hips and knees. I think my Indian background helps here as well. So to come into it, you would want to take the right foot onto the hip first.
Okay.
And you want to try and keep the thigh and the calf together as you do that, and then bring the other one on top.
Okay.
So yeah.
And then so you do this, and then do you close your eyes and breathe in a certain way, or is that part of it?
So you can do. I mean, this would be, again, it's the typical
yeah. Like yoga 101.
Yeah, exactly. The typical meditation posture that you see all the great stages in, etc. Yeah, you can do breathing exercises and that, but you don't have to, you can sit in any way that's comfortable for you.
Perfect.
I often tell my students, if cross-legged doesn't work for you for any reason, sit with the legs extended forward, sit with them wider.
Yeah.
If ever we're doing any breathing pranayama, sit in a chair if you have to, It's like yoga can be accessible for everybody and for every body type. It's really important to remember that.
No, that's really perfect. And Saida, just to let people know, if they maybe want to contact you and maybe have a more personal, longer session, because I believe you do offer that.
Yeah, sure. I run online classes, and I have an on-demand library with a growing library of classes which can be accessed anytime, and I do also offer one-to-ones, and there's some free content on my YouTube channel as well. So
perfect. What's it called, Saida?
So the YouTube channel is Sada Yoga, SADA Yoga, and then my website is sadayoga.co.uk.
And I believe you have a Facebook page as well with the same name? And
Instagram, yes, correct. All of the handles will be accessible from every other handle. So if you find one, you can find them all.
Perfect. No, that's really amazing. And honestly, I mean, had such a amazing time discussing yoga and then spirituality connection and then religion as well, because a lot of people from Muslim background would find that interesting because they can relate for what I've shared from my perspective as well. And then overall, what you described about yoga, I think a lot of misconceptions or misunderstandings, I think people can now understand what it's about. So I hope people watch our podcast, liked our podcast, and hopefully if guys give me any more questions, I will request Saida again for another session, hopefully. But Saida,
I love it.
Saida, if you would like to add something before we finish our podcast.
I don't think so. Just thanks for having me. It's been great. I absolutely love these kind of conversations. Really, it's been really lovely to talk to you. So thanks for having me.
No, thank you so much, and it was really enlightening, and a lot of information was really interesting for me. So until the very next time, I'll catch you soon.
Thank you.
What are you waiting for? Subscribe.